Why prehistoric Australia was the deadliest place that existed. Prehistoric Australia was one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Over tens of thousands of years, the land was home to extreme heat, deadly animals, and harsh landscapes. Giant snakes, massive crocodiles, and enormous spiders were common threats. The environment was often dry, with limited water and scarce food. Early humans who lived there had to learn to survive against these dangers every day. Volcanic eruptions, sudden floods, and intense storms added to the risks. Life in this land required constant vigilance, skill, and strength. Prehistoric Australia is a subject that stretches across immense spans of time, covering millions of years, and it is a story that is both complex and fascinating. The continent that we now know as Australia was not always as it appears today. Long before humans set foot on the land, before any of the familiar animals we associate with Australia roamed its vast landscapes, and long before the first plants established themselves in recognizable forms, the continent was in constant change. Its position on the globe was different, its climate was shifting, and its landforms were forming through processes that took millions of years. To understand prehistoric Australia, one must look back into the very deep past, where time is measured not in decades or centuries, but in millions of years, a scale that can be difficult to grasp, yet it shapes the world as we know it today. During the earliest periods of its existence, the landmass that would become Australia was part of a much larger supercontinent. This supercontinent was known as Gondwana. Gondwana included the landmasses that are now Africa, South America, Antarctica, India, and Australia. The movements of these giant pieces of the Earth's crust, called tectonic plates, slowly shaped Australia's position. Millions of years ago, Australia was closer to the South Pole than it is now. Its placement in this southern region affected its climate, its ecosystems, and the types of life it could support. The climate during these early times was different from what exists on the continent today. In some periods, it was warmer, and in other periods, it became colder and more arid. The changes in temperature and rainfall were gradual and uneven, but over time they created different environments, from coastal plains to vast deserts, and from lush forests to open woodlands. The land itself was also changing. Volcanic activity, erosion, and the shifting of tectonic plates continually reshaped the surface of the continent. Mountains rose in some areas, while others sank or were worn down. Rivers carved deep valleys and formed wide floodplains. Inland lakes appeared and disappeared as rainfall patterns changed over hundreds of thousands of years. These processes created the physical environment in which plants and animals evolved, and eventually they created the landscapes that would later be inhabited by humans. The earliest forms of life in prehistoric Australia were simple and microscopic. Bacteria and single-celled organisms dominated the environment hundreds of millions of years ago. Over time, these simple forms of life evolved into more complex organisms. Plants began to establish themselves on the land, creating the first green cover. These early plants were very different from modern species. They included mosses, ferns, and other primitive types of vegetation. These plants slowly spread across the continent, providing habitats and food for the first animals to emerge on land. The first animals that appeared on the continent were small and simple. Insects and early amphibians moved across the land, taking advantage of the newly formed forests and river systems. Some of these animals eventually developed the ability to live in water and on land, and their descendants would include the ancestors of many of the species we know today. Over millions of years, life grew more diverse. Reptiles became more common, and the first mammals appeared. These early mammals were small, often no larger than modern mice, and they lived in the shadows of the dominant reptiles of the time, such as giant lizards and early dinosaurs. Dinosaurs played a significant role in prehistoric Australia. Fossil evidence shows that a variety of dinosaur species lived on the continent. Some were large herbivores that grazed on plants and ferns, while others were predators that hunted these herbivores. The fossils of dinosaurs in Australia reveal a mixture of species, some of which were unique to the continent. These creatures lived in forests, near rivers, and in open areas, and they were part of a complex ecosystem that included other reptiles, amphibians, and early mammals. The presence of dinosaurs shows that prehistoric Australia had a rich and varied environment capable of supporting large and active animal populations. The climate of prehistoric Australia changed over time, influencing the types of plants and animals that could survive. There were periods when the continent experienced warm, wet conditions that supported dense forests. At other times, the climate became drier, leading to the expansion of open woodlands and grasslands. These changes were driven by shifts in the Earth's orbit, the movement of tectonic plates, and variations in the atmosphere. The changing climate created a dynamic environment in which species had to adapt or face extinction. The fossils preserved in rocks across Australia provide evidence of these shifts and show how plants and animals responded to the changing world around them. Australia's rivers, lakes, and coastlines were also important for prehistoric life. Water was essential for the survival of both plants and animals, and many species were closely associated with rivers and lakes. Fossilized fish, amphibians, and even early crocodile-like creatures show that water systems were central to the ecosystems of prehistoric Australia. The coastlines were also significant, as they provided habitats for marine life and areas for animals to feed and reproduce. Over millions of years, changes in sea level caused the coastlines to move, expanding and shrinking habitats and forcing species to adapt to new conditions. In addition to dinosaurs and reptiles, prehistoric Australia saw the rise of unique mammals. Australia's mammalian history is distinct because it took a different evolutionary path than other continents. The isolation of the continent allowed mammals to evolve into forms not seen anywhere else. Marsupials, for example, became a dominant group of mammals. These included small species as well as larger ones, some of which were comparable in size to modern kangaroos. Monotremes, egg-laying mammals such as early ancestors of the platypus, were also present. The diversity of mammals shows that Australia was a place of unique evolutionary developments, shaped by isolation, climate, and geography. Fossil evidence from prehistoric Australia reveals many extinct species that were once part of the landscape. Megafauna, very large animals, roamed the continent during certain periods. These included giant wombats, enormous kangaroos, and massive reptiles. The megafauna were part of complex ecosystems that included predators, herbivores, and scavengers. Their fossils help scientists understand how prehistoric Australia functioned and how different species interacted. The study of these fossils shows that the continent was once home to animals of extraordinary size and diversity, adapted to the specific environments of Australia. Prehistoric Australia was also shaped by natural events such as volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and shifts in climate. Volcanic activity created mountains, changed the soil composition, and influenced the climate in local regions. Earthquakes caused land to rise and fall, creating new rivers and altering the flow of water. These events had significant effects on plant and animal life, sometimes destroying habitats and other times creating opportunities for new species to establish themselves. The continent's history is recorded not only in fossils, but also in rocks, soil layers, and other geological formations that preserve evidence of these ancient events. The flora of prehistoric Australia was diverse and changed over time. Early forests were dominated by ferns and conifer-like trees, which formed dense, shaded environments. Over millions of years, flowering plants began to appear, adding new forms of vegetation and changing the structure of ecosystems. These plants provided food and shelter for animals and influenced the development of the continent's fauna. Different regions of Australia supported different types of vegetation, depending on climate, soil, and water availability. Coastal areas had their own plant communities, while inland plains and deserts supported hardy species adapted to drier conditions. Australia's prehistoric environments also included deserts and semi-arid regions, even millions of years ago. These areas were harsh and presented challenges for life, but some species were able to survive and adapt. Animals developed ways to find water and food in difficult conditions, and plants evolved features that allowed them to retain moisture and withstand extreme heat. The existence of deserts shows that prehistoric Australia was not uniform in climate or vegetation. Different regions offered distinct habitats and shaped the evolution of species in different ways. Marine life was also an important part of prehistoric Australia. The surrounding oceans provided food, migration routes, and habitats for many species. Fossilized shells, fish bones, and remains of ancient marine reptiles show that the seas around Australia were rich in life. Coral reefs, shallow coastal waters, and deep ocean areas all supported different types of marine organisms. Over time, changes in sea level affected marine habitats, sometimes exposing new land and sometimes flooding areas that were previously dry. These changes had significant effects on both land and marine ecosystems, influencing the development of species and the distribution of life across the continent. The movement of continents over millions of years affected the climate and environments of prehistoric Australia. As Australia drifted northward from its position near the South Pole, it gradually entered warmer regions of the globe. This shift influenced rainfall patterns, temperature ranges, and the types of plants and animals that could survive. The slow movement of the continent had profound effects on ecosystems, creating new habitats and eliminating others. The geological record shows evidence of these movements in the arrangement of rocks, fossil distribution, and the formation of mountain ranges and basins. Volcanic eruptions in prehistoric Australia left lasting marks on the landscape. Lava flows, ash layers, and volcanic cones are preserved in the geological record. These features not only changed the terrain, but also affected the soil and plant life. Volcanic soil can be very fertile, allowing plants to thrive, and it may have supported bursts of plant growth after eruptions. In some areas, volcanic activity created barriers and altered river courses, affecting the distribution of animals and their migration patterns. The study of ancient volcanoes helps scientists understand how natural events shaped prehistoric ecosystems. Rivers and lakes were crucial for the development of life in prehistoric Australia. Water sources allowed plants to grow and animals to survive. Ancient riverbeds, lake deposits, and wetland sediments contain fossils of fish, amphibians, reptiles, and early mammals. These sites provide valuable evidence of prehistoric life and the environmental conditions that existed at different times. Water also influenced the movement of species across the continent. Animals depended on rivers and lakes for drinking water and food, and they often traveled along these waterways. Prehistoric Australia also experienced periods of extreme climate changes, including glacial periods and warming phases. During glacial periods, ice sheets and glaciers covered parts of the southern regions, lowering temperatures and affecting rainfall. During warming phases, ice retreated, temperatures rose, and new environments became available for plants and animals. These cycles occurred over tens of thousands of years and shaped the evolution and distribution of species. Fossil evidence shows how animals and plants adapted to these changing conditions, sometimes moving to new regions or developing new characteristics to survive. Early Australian mammals, reptiles, and birds evolved in response to these changing environments. The isolation of the continent allowed species to develop unique adaptations that were not found elsewhere. Marsupials, monotremes, and a wide variety of reptiles filled ecological roles that, in other continents, were occupied by placental mammals. Birds, too, evolved into a range of species, some capable of flight and others that remained grounded. These animals created complex ecosystems, interacting with plants, water systems, and each other in ways that shaped the prehistoric world of Australia. Fossils from prehistoric Australia show a record of life that is both ancient and unique. Scientists have discovered bones, teeth, footprints, and other remains that provide insights into the size, behavior, and diet of animals that lived millions of years ago. Fossilized plants show the types of vegetation present, and sedimentary layers reveal information about climate, water levels, and geological events. These fossils allow researchers to reconstruct the ancient environments and understand how life on the continent developed over time. The study of prehistoric Australia involves many different fields of science. Paleontology, the study of fossils, provides information about animals and plants. Geology reveals how the land and climate changed over millions of years. Climate science and biology help explain how species adapted to shifting environments. Together, these disciplines create a detailed picture of a continent in constant change, where life evolved in isolation and responded to both gradual and sudden environmental shifts. The early history of Australia is not only about plants and animals. Microorganisms played a crucial role in shaping ecosystems. Bacteria, fungi, and other small life forms contributed to soil development, nutrient cycling, and the decomposition of organic material. These processes allowed plants to grow and supported the food chains that sustained larger animals. Even in prehistoric times, the interactions between microorganisms, plants, and animals created complex networks of life that ensured the survival of species in a changing world. Australia's isolation over millions of years created a natural laboratory for evolution. Species developed traits that allowed them to survive in specific conditions, and many forms of life remained unique to the continent. Fossils show that some species persisted for millions of years with little change, while others evolved rapidly in response to environmental pressures. This process of evolution shaped the variety of life on the continent and left a legacy that continues in the modern fauna and flora of Australia. The continent's geology, climate, and ecosystems set the stage for future developments, including the arrival of humans. By the time the first people arrived in Australia, the land had already undergone millions of years of change. Mountains, rivers, deserts, and forests had formed. Many species of animals and plants had evolved, creating a diverse and sometimes dangerous environment. Understanding the prehistoric period helps explain how the continent came to be the place it is today and why it hosted such unique life forms. Over hundreds of millions of years, Australia experienced the rise and fall of countless species. Extinctions occurred naturally as climates changed and environments shifted. New species appeared, adapted to the available resources, and sometimes dominated ecosystems for long periods. Fossil evidence from different regions shows a dynamic and evolving continent, where life continually responded to the conditions of the time. The complexity of these ancient ecosystems demonstrates that prehistoric Australia was a place of remarkable biological diversity, shaped by millions of years of natural processes. The physical features of prehistoric Australia, such as mountains, plateaus, and river systems, were important in shaping the patterns of life. Mountains provided shelter and varied climates, while rivers and lakes offered water and food sources. Coastal areas supported marine life and allowed species to move along the edges of the continent. These features influenced migration, reproduction, and survival. Animals developed behaviors that allowed them to take advantage of these features, and plants evolved to thrive in specific soil types and climates. Prehistoric Australia's environment was never static. Wind, water, and geological processes constantly reshaped the land. Sediments were deposited in rivers and lakes, eroded from mountains, and carried across plains. These processes created new habitats and sometimes destroyed existing ones. The constant change meant that life had to be flexible. Plants and animals evolved to survive in a world where conditions were continually shifting, and this adaptability is recorded in the fossil record. The study of prehistoric Australia provides insights into how life develops and adapts over long periods. The fossils of animals and plants, the layers of rocks, and the traces of ancient rivers and lakes tell a story of change and survival. By examining these records, scientists can understand how ecosystems functioned in the past and how species interacted with each other and with their environment. These insights are valuable not only for understanding Australia's history, but also for understanding the processes that shape life on Earth in general. In prehistoric Australia, the interactions between species were complex. Predators hunted prey, herbivores grazed on plants, and scavengers fed on remains. These interactions created food chains and food webs that maintained balance in ecosystems. Some species were dominant in certain regions, while others were rare and specialized. Competition, cooperation, and adaptation were ongoing processes, shaping the structure of communities and the survival of species. Fossil evidence, including footprints, teeth marks, and skeletal remains, provides clues to these ancient interactions. The landscapes of prehistoric Australia included not only forests and deserts, but also wetlands, river valleys, and coastal plains. Each of these environments supported different species and created unique ecological niches. Wetlands were home to amphibians and fish, while forests supported a variety of reptiles, mammals, and birds. Coastal areas offered marine resources and opportunities for species to exploit both land and water. The diversity of habitats contributed to the richness of life and allowed for the evolution of specialized forms adapted to specific conditions. The movement of species across the continent was influenced by geography and climate. Animals migrated in search of food and water, and plants spread through seeds carried by wind, water, or animals. Over long periods, species colonized new areas and sometimes became isolated in specific regions. This isolation led to further evolutionary changes, creating new species adapted to local conditions. Fossils show patterns of movement and adaptation that illustrate how prehistoric Australia was a land of constant change and biological innovation. Extinction was also a significant aspect of prehistoric Australia. Species that could not adapt to changing climates, competition, or new predators disappeared from the landscape. Extinction events could be local, affecting certain regions, or more widespread, influencing large portions of the continent. The loss of species reshaped ecosystems, allowing new forms of life to emerge and fill ecological gaps. Fossils provide evidence of these events and help scientists understand the dynamics of ancient ecosystems. The study of prehistoric Australia requires careful examination of geological formations, fossilized remains, and sedimentary records. Rocks preserve evidence of past environments, including the presence of rivers, lakes, and oceans. Fossils reveal the types of plants and animals that existed and their physical characteristics. Sedimentary layers record changes in climate, volcanic activity, and other natural processes. Together, these records create a detailed picture of a continent that was continually evolving over millions of years. Australia's prehistoric period was marked by the interaction of life and environment. Plants and animals shaped their surroundings, while the land, climate, and natural events influenced the development of life. This dynamic relationship created complex ecosystems with diverse species and intricate food webs. Fossils, geological records, and climate data provide evidence of these interactions and show how life on the continent evolved in response to changing conditions. Geography and climate in prehistoric times played a central role in shaping where early life forms could exist, how they survived, and how they changed over long periods of time. The land surfaces of the Earth were not fixed in the way they appear today. They were influenced by slow movements of the ground, changes in sea levels, and long cycles of temperature change. These conditions created environments that were constantly adjusting. Land areas included dry regions with limited water sources, thick plant regions with layered vegetation, cold regions covered by ice for long periods, and warm regions with heavy rainfall patterns at certain times of the year. Each of these environments affected the availability of food, shelter, and movement paths for living organisms. In many prehistoric regions, dry land areas developed where rainfall was rare and water sources were scattered across wide distances. These dry regions often had ground surfaces shaped by wind activity and occasional water flow after rare rainfall events. In such areas, survival depended on locating water sources that appeared and disappeared based on seasonal and long-term climate patterns. Plant life in these dry regions adapted to limited moisture by developing short growth cycles or remaining dormant for long periods. Animal life in these areas developed movement patterns that followed water availability and plant growth cycles. The distribution of life forms in dry regions was not uniform, as some zones contained no visible life for long periods, while other zones temporarily supported a variety of organisms when water became available. In regions with higher rainfall levels, plant growth developed in layered structures. Ground-level plants, mid-level shrubs, and taller plant forms created multiple layers of vegetation. These layered plant structures influenced how sunlight reached the ground and how moisture remained within the soil. Water from rainfall was absorbed into the soil and slowly released into surrounding areas, maintaining moisture levels for extended periods. Animal life in these regions developed relationships with the plant structures, using them for shelter, feeding, and protection. Movement patterns in such environments were influenced by the availability of plant-based food sources and water distribution across the land surface. The arrangement of plant life also influenced soil stability and the movement of water across the ground. Cold regions during prehistoric times were shaped by long periods of low temperature. In these areas, large portions of land were covered by frozen water surfaces or hardened ground layers. During warmer periods within these cold regions, frozen surfaces would partially melt, allowing temporary movement of water and limited biological activity. When temperatures dropped again, these surfaces returned to frozen conditions. Life in such regions adapted to these cycles by developing survival strategies that functioned under both frozen and partially thawed conditions. Plant growth in these regions was limited to short active periods when ground conditions allowed moisture absorption and sunlight exposure. Animal life often adjusted movement and feeding behavior based on temperature cycles and the availability of accessible ground areas. Forested regions during prehistoric times contained thick arrangements of plant life that developed over long periods of stable moisture and temperature conditions. These regions included ground cover plants, climbing plants, and tall plant structures that extended upward towards sunlight. The arrangement of vegetation influenced how air moved near the ground and how light reached lower layers of plant life. Soil in these regions often contained high levels of organic material from decayed plant matter, which supported continued plant growth. Animal life in these forested regions interacted with different layers of vegetation, using them for food sources, nesting areas, and movement pathways. The presence of multiple plant layers influenced how species distributed themselves across different heights and ground levels. The movement of water across prehistoric land surfaces played a major role in shaping geographical features. Rainfall patterns created small streams that gradually formed larger water channels. These channels carried sediment and shaped the surrounding land surfaces over long periods of time. In dry regions, water channels often appeared temporarily after rainfall events and disappeared when water sources dried out. In wetter regions, water channels remained active for longer periods and contributed to the formation of stable water systems. Lakes formed in areas where water collected in low-lying ground sections. These lakes changed size based on rainfall levels and evaporation rates, affecting surrounding plant and animal life. Climate patterns in prehistoric times were influenced by long cycles of temperature change. These cycles affected the distribution of dry regions, wet regions, cold regions, and moderately warm regions. Temperature changes influenced the movement of water across land surfaces and the development of plant life. When temperatures increased in certain regions, water evaporation increased and soil moisture decreased, affecting plant growth. When temperatures decreased, water remained in soil and surface layers for longer periods, allowing different plant structures to develop. These changes influenced where animal populations could exist and how they moved across land surfaces in search of food and shelter. Wind activity played an important role in shaping land surfaces in dry regions. Wind moved fine particles across open land areas, gradually changing the shape of the ground surface. These particles accumulated in certain areas and were removed from others, creating uneven ground formations. Wind also influenced the distribution of seeds and plant material across land surfaces, affecting where plant growth could occur. In regions with limited plant cover, wind activity had stronger effects on the ground surface. In regions with thicker plant cover, vegetation reduced wind movement near the ground and helped stabilize soil conditions. Volcanic activity in prehistoric times contributed to changes in geography and climate. When volcanic material reached the surface, it spread across surrounding land areas and altered soil composition. Over time, volcanic deposits contributed to the formation of new ground surfaces that supported plant growth after initial changes in temperature and soil conditions. Volcanic emissions also affected atmospheric conditions, influencing temperature patterns and rainfall distribution for certain periods. These changes affected how plant and animal life adjusted to new environmental conditions. In some regions, volcanic surfaces gradually became stable environments that supported new biological activity after long periods of adjustment. The distribution of freshwater sources in prehistoric times determined where many forms of life could exist. Rivers, lakes, and underground water sources provided access to moisture in environments where surface water was limited. River systems developed pathways across land surfaces, connecting different regions and allowing movement of water, sediment, and biological material. Lakes formed in low-lying areas and changed size based on water input and evaporation rates. Underground water sources provided moisture to surrounding soil, supporting plant growth in areas where surface water was not always present. The presence or absence of freshwater sources influenced how living organisms distributed themselves across land regions. Soil composition in prehistoric times varied widely depending on local environmental conditions. Some soil types contained high levels of mineral content from rock breakdown, while others contained high levels of organic material from plant decomposition. Soil structure influenced how water was absorbed and retained in different regions. In areas with high mineral content, water movement through soil occurred at different rates compared to areas with high organic content. Soil conditions influenced plant growth patterns, which in turn affected animal distribution and movement. Over long periods, soil conditions changed based on climate patterns, vegetation growth, and water activity. Seasonal cycles influenced environmental conditions in many prehistoric regions. Periods of increased rainfall were followed by periods of reduced rainfall, affecting water availability and plant growth cycles. Temperature changes across seasonal cycles influenced the activity levels of living organisms and their movement patterns. In some regions, seasonal changes created alternating periods of high plant growth and limited plant availability. These cycles influenced feeding patterns, reproduction timing, and movement behavior across many forms of life. Seasonal changes also affected water levels in rivers and lakes, altering the availability of freshwater resources. Atmospheric conditions in prehistoric times influenced climate patterns across different regions. The composition of gases in the atmosphere affected temperature regulation and rainfall distribution. Changes in atmospheric conditions over long periods contributed to shifts in environmental zones. These shifts influenced the distribution of dry areas, wet areas, cold regions, and moderately warm regions. Atmospheric circulation patterns moved moisture and temperature variations across the planet, affecting regional climate conditions. In many prehistoric regions, natural events such as flooding, drought periods, and temperature changes affected the structure of land surfaces and living conditions. Flooding events altered river pathways, deposited new soil layers, and changed the distribution of plant life. Drought periods reduced water availability and affected plant growth cycles. Temperature fluctuations influenced the expansion and reduction of plant and animal activity in different regions. These natural events occurred repeatedly over long periods of time, contributing to continuous changes in environmental conditions. The interaction between geography and climate in prehistoric times created environments that were in constant transition. Land surfaces, water systems, atmospheric conditions, and biological activity were connected through ongoing environmental processes. Megafauna dominance describes a period in ancient natural history when very large animals lived across many parts of the land and shaped the environment through their presence, movement, feeding habits, and survival needs. These animals are often described as megafauna because of their very large bodies and strong physical structures. In prehistoric Australia, these animals included diprotodons, giant wombat-like creatures, massive reptiles such as Megalania, large birds, and many other long-extinct species that lived across different environments such as open plains, woodlands, river systems, and dry regions. Their presence created a world where large bodies of life were common and where daily survival depended on finding food, water, and shelter in changing natural conditions. Diprotodon was one of the most well-known megafauna animals in prehistoric Australia. It was a large marsupial with a heavy body, strong limbs, and a broad head. It lived in different parts of the continent and moved through areas where vegetation was available. Its diet mainly included plants such as leaves, shrubs, and grasses. It had large teeth designed for grinding plant material, and its digestive system processed large amounts of plant matter every day. Diprotodon lived in groups or moved alone depending on environmental conditions and availability of resources. It needed large amounts of vegetation and water sources to maintain its body, and it often traveled across wide landscapes in search of feeding grounds. The presence of Diprotodon influenced plant growth in areas where it fed, as repeated grazing affected how vegetation regenerated over time. Alongside Diprotodon, there were other large marsupials that contributed to megafauna dominance. Giant wombat-like animals lived in similar environments and shared some physical characteristics with modern wombats, although they were much more robust in body structure. These animals dug burrows or used natural shelters for resting and protection. Their limbs were strong and adapted for digging and movement through soil and vegetation. They consumed plant material and had teeth adapted for chewing tough vegetation. Their activities affected soil conditions, as digging and movement changed the surface layers of the ground and influenced how water and plant roots interacted with the soil. Massive reptiles also lived during this period and formed an important part of megafauna ecosystems. Megalania was one of these reptiles and is known for its large body, strong limbs, and long tail. It moved across land areas and used its physical strength for hunting and survival. It had sharp teeth and a muscular body structure that supported movement across different terrain types. It occupied various environments, including forest edges, open land, and areas near water sources. It hunted other animals and also scavenged when food sources were available. Its presence influenced the behavior of other animals, as many species had to remain aware of its movement within their environment. Large birds also existed during this time and formed part of the megafauna community. These birds had strong legs, large bodies, and beaks designed for feeding on plants, small animals, or a combination of both depending on the species. Some of these birds could not fly and instead moved across the ground using strong walking or running ability. They laid eggs in nests built on the ground or in protected areas. Their feeding behavior influenced seed distribution and vegetation patterns in certain areas, as seeds were moved through digestion and later released into the environment. Megafauna animals existed across different climates and landscapes. Some regions had more vegetation and water sources, while other areas were dry and required long movement across land to find resources. These animals adapted their movement patterns according to seasonal changes in rainfall and temperature. During wetter conditions, vegetation became more widespread and feeding opportunities increased. During drier conditions, animals moved toward remaining water sources and areas where plants continued to grow. This movement created repeated pathways across land that were used by different species over time. The life cycles of megafauna animals were slow and involved long periods of growth and development. Diprotodons, for example, required extended time to reach full body size. Young animals depended on maternal care during early stages of life. Protection from environmental dangers was important, and survival depended on access to stable environments where food and water were available. Reproduction occurred in cycles influenced by environmental conditions, and the survival of offspring depended on both natural resources and environmental stability. Giant wombat-like animals also followed long growth patterns. They spent much time developing strong body structures and learning movement through their environment. Burrowing behavior played a role in protection from environmental conditions and provided shelter during rest periods. These burrows also influenced the physical structure of soil layers and created small underground spaces that were used by other organisms. Megalania and other large reptiles followed different life patterns. They depended on hunting, movement, and adaptation to changing surroundings. Their reproduction involved laying eggs in protected areas, often hidden from other animals. Hatchlings grew independently and developed survival skills through movement and feeding behavior. These reptiles needed sufficient territory to hunt and move freely, and they occupied different ecological zones depending on resource availability. Megafauna dominance also influenced plant life across prehistoric Australia. Large herbivorous animals fed on vegetation regularly, affecting plant distribution and growth patterns. Some plants adapted to repeated feeding by developing stronger structures or faster regrowth cycles. Seed movement occurred through digestion and natural dispersal, allowing plant species to spread across different regions. The interaction between animals and plants created a continuous cycle of feeding and regeneration that shaped the landscape over long periods of time. Water sources played an important role in megafauna survival. Rivers, lakes, and underground water reserves provided essential hydration. Animals often gathered near these sources, creating areas of high activity where feeding, resting, and movement occurred frequently. These locations became important points within the natural environment, supporting multiple species at the same time. Seasonal changes affected water availability, and animals adjusted their movement patterns based on these changes. The structure of megafauna communities included interactions between different species. Herbivorous animals focused on plant consumption, while carnivorous reptiles and other predators focused on hunting and scavenging. These interactions created a balance of survival behaviors where each species followed its own patterns of movement and feeding. The presence of large herbivores influenced predator behavior, as predators adjusted their hunting strategies based on movement patterns and group sizes of prey animals. Environmental conditions during megafauna dominance changed over long periods of time. Climate shifts influenced vegetation growth, water availability, and habitat distribution. During periods of increased rainfall, vegetation expanded and supported larger populations of herbivorous megafauna. During periods of reduced rainfall, vegetation became limited, and animals needed to travel further distances to find food. These changes affected survival patterns and influenced the distribution of animal populations across the land. Soil conditions were also affected by megafauna activity. Large animals moving across land compressed soil in certain areas and loosened soil in others, through digging and movement. Burrowing animals created underground spaces that altered soil structure and water flow. These changes influenced plant growth and affected how vegetation spread across different environments. Over time, repeated movement patterns created pathways that were used frequently by multiple species. Megafauna animals communicated through sound, movement, and environmental signals. Some species used vocal sounds to communicate between individuals, especially during mating or group movement. Others relied on body movement or changes in behavior to signal awareness of environmental conditions. These forms of communication helped animals respond to threats, locate resources, and maintain social structures where applicable. Reproductive behavior among megafauna species involved seasonal patterns influenced by environmental conditions. Animals often reproduced during periods when food resources were more abundant. Offspring were raised in environments where protection and nourishment were available. Survival rates depended on environmental stability, availability of food, and presence of predators. The extinction of megafauna animals occurred after long periods of environmental change. Shifts in climate, reduction in vegetation, and changes in water availability influenced the survival of large-bodied species. Human activity also began to interact with megafauna populations, affecting their movement and survival patterns. Hunting practices, landscape changes, and fire use influenced habitats and contributed to pressure on animal populations. Over time, many megafauna species disappeared from the landscape, leaving behind fossil evidence that provides information about their existence. Predatory reptiles played a major role in the natural world of prehistoric Australia, where large crocodile species and powerful monitor lizards moved through rivers, wetlands, forests, and dry land environments with strong hunting ability and steady survival skills. These reptiles lived in different habitats across the continent and adapted to changes in water levels, vegetation growth, and climate shifts that shaped the land over long periods of time. Their presence influenced the movement and behavior of many other animals, as they occupied an important position in food chains across many regions. Crocodile species in prehistoric Australia existed in both freshwater and marine environments. Some of these crocodiles lived in river systems, swamps, floodplains, and coastal waters. Their bodies were adapted for long periods of wading in water, with eyes and nostrils positioned in a way that allowed them to stay mostly submerged while still observing surroundings above the surface. Their skin was thick and covered with protective scales that reduced damage from external threats and environmental conditions. Their tails were strong and helped them move through water with controlled motion, allowing them to position themselves in different directions without sudden effort. Different crocodile species existed across various time periods, and fossil evidence shows that some of them reached large body sizes. These reptiles had jaws filled with strong teeth designed for gripping and holding prey. Their feeding behavior involved remaining still for extended periods before moving quickly when an opportunity appeared. Their movement on land was slower, but they were still able to travel short distances between water sources or resting areas when needed. The combination of aquatic ability and land movement made them capable of occupying multiple ecological zones. One of the well-known prehistoric crocodile groups in Australia included species that lived during the Miocene and Pliocene periods. These crocodiles occupied river systems that were often wide and slow-moving. The water environments provided conditions that supported fish, turtles, birds, and other animals that formed part of the surrounding ecosystem. Crocodiles positioned themselves within these environments in a way that allowed them to respond quickly to movement in the water or along the edges of riverbanks. The structure of crocodile eyes allowed them to remain partially hidden while still maintaining visual awareness of activity around them. Their eyes had protective coverings that helped reduce irritation from water and debris. Their nostrils were positioned at the top of the snout, which allowed them to breathe while remaining mostly underwater. This positioning allowed them to stay still without revealing their full body presence in the environment. Crocodile reproduction involved laying eggs in nests constructed near water. These nests were often made from soil, vegetation, and other natural materials found in the environment. Female crocodiles remained near the nesting sites for protection during the incubation period. Hatchlings emerged from eggs and moved toward water shortly after birth. Early survival depended on access to shallow areas where smaller prey items were available and where larger predators had limited access. In prehistoric Australia, Some crocodile species adapted to freshwater systems that experienced seasonal changes. Water levels in rivers and wetlands shifted during wet and dry periods, and crocodiles adjusted their movement patterns based on availability of water. During times when water levels increased, crocodiles spread across wider areas, entering newly formed channels and flooded zones. During dry periods, they concentrated in deeper water pools that retained moisture. Fossil remains indicate that crocodiles in prehistoric Australia developed different skull shapes and jaw structures depending on species. Some had long and narrow snouts, while others had broader snouts with stronger bite force distribution. These differences influenced feeding behavior and prey handling methods. Fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and other available animals formed part of the diet of various crocodile species depending on habitat and size. Monitor lizards also played an important role in prehistoric Australian ecosystems. These reptiles belonged to a group that included large terrestrial species capable of moving across land environments such as forests, open plains, and rocky areas. One of the most notable prehistoric monitor lizards from Australia is known from fossil evidence as a very large species that lived during the Pleistocene period. This species had a long body, strong limbs, and a tail that supported balance during movement. Monitor lizards had forked tongues that allowed them to gather chemical information from the environment. This sensory system helped them detect the presence of other animals, food sources, and environmental changes. Their tongues collected particles from the air and ground, which were then processed through sensory organs in the mouth. This system allowed them to respond to conditions in their surroundings in a detailed way. The body structure of monitor lizards included strong muscles that supported movement across different surfaces. Their limbs allowed them to climb, dig, and travel over uneven ground. Their claws were useful for gripping soil, breaking into nests, and holding onto surfaces while moving. Their skin was covered with scales that provided protection from environmental exposure and physical contact with rough terrain. Prehistoric monitor lizards in Australia occupied different ecological roles depending on their size and habitat. Some species lived near rivers and wetlands, while others occupied dry regions and forested areas. Their feeding behavior included consuming a wide range of food sources such as smaller reptiles, eggs, insects, and carrion. Their adaptability allowed them to survive in environments where food availability changed over time. Large monitor lizard species had skull structures that supported strong jaw muscles. Their teeth were curved and sharp, allowing them to hold and process food items effectively. Their feeding method involved capturing prey with quick movement, followed by secure gripping. They used their jaws in repeated motions to break down food before swallowing. Their digestive systems were able to process a wide range of organic material, which supported survival in diverse environments. Fossil evidence from Australia shows that monitor lizards reached significant sizes in prehistoric periods. Their skeletal remains indicate strong bone structure and well-developed muscle attachment points. These features suggest that they were capable of sustained movement and physical activity across large territories. Their distribution across different regions shows that they occupied a wide range of habitats. Crocodiles and monitor lizards existed alongside many other animals in prehistoric Australia, forming part of ecosystems that included marsupials, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and fish. Rivers and wetlands served as central areas for activity, where water supported life for multiple species. Dry regions supported monitor lizards and other reptiles that adapted to limited water availability. The interaction between crocodiles and their environment involved constant adjustment to seasonal changes. When rainfall increased, river systems expanded, and crocodiles moved into new areas where food sources became more accessible. When rainfall decreased, water sources became limited, and crocodiles remained in deeper pools or permanent water bodies. These patterns influenced movement across landscapes over long periods of time. Monitor lizards also adjusted their behavior based on environmental conditions. During periods of higher temperature and lower water availability, they reduced activity during certain times of day and increased movement during cooler periods. Their ability to seek shelter in burrows, under rocks, or within vegetation provided protection from environmental exposure. Prehistoric crocodiles developed strong sensory systems that allowed them to detect movement in water through vibrations. Their bodies responded to disturbances in the water surface, which indicated the presence of animals moving nearby. This sensitivity supported their feeding behavior and allowed them to respond quickly when conditions changed. The skull structure of crocodiles included strong attachment points for jaw muscles. These muscles allowed controlled opening and closing of the mouth. Their teeth were replaced throughout their lives, ensuring continued function despite wear. Their feeding process involves securing prey and using body movement to maintain control while feeding. Monitor lizards displayed behavioral flexibility that allowed them to use different environments for feeding and movement. Their ability to climb allowed access to elevated areas where eggs and smaller animals could be found. Their digging behavior allowed them to reach underground nests and hidden food sources. Their movement patterns were influenced by temperature, food availability, and habitat structure. In river environments, crocodiles often remained in submerged positions for extended periods. Their respiration system allowed them to hold breath for long durations, reducing the need for frequent surfacing. Their metabolic rate adjusted to environmental conditions, supporting energy conservation during periods of inactivity. Monitor lizards maintained activity patterns that involved movement across land surfaces in search of food and shelter. Their tongues continued to gather environmental information, which supported decision-making in movement and feeding. Their sensory system provided continuous input from surroundings, helping them respond to changes in habitat conditions. Fossil discoveries in Australia show that prehistoric reptiles were widely distributed across the continent. Crocodile fossils have been found in regions that once contained large river systems and wetland environments. Monitor lizard fossils have been discovered in both dry and forested areas, indicating adaptability to different ecological zones. The skeletal structure of crocodiles shows adaptation for aquatic life, with limb positioning that supports swimming and stability in water. Their tails provided propulsion and directional control during movement. Their body shape reduced resistance in water, allowing efficient movement in aquatic environments. Monitor lizards had limb structures that supported movement on land. Their joints allowed flexibility during climbing and running. Their tail structure supported balance during rapid changes in direction. Their bone density provided strength for movement across uneven terrain. Reproductive behavior in crocodiles involved careful selection of nesting sites. Temperature and moisture levels influenced egg development. Hatchlings required access to suitable environments for early survival, including shallow water and protective vegetation. Monitor lizards laid eggs in secure locations such as burrows or concealed ground areas. Egg incubation depended on environmental temperature and soil conditions. Young lizards emerged with independent behavior and immediate ability to move and feed. The presence of crocodiles and monitor lizards influenced ecological patterns across prehistoric Australia. Their movement affected distribution of other animals and contributed to shaping habitat use. Water systems provided central locations for interaction among multiple species. Crocodiles maintained long-term presence in aquatic environments, while monitor lizards occupied land-based ecosystems with flexible movement patterns. Both groups demonstrated survival strategies that allowed them to persist across changing environmental conditions and shifting landscapes. Megalania, also known in scientific naming as Varanus priscus, was a giant monitor lizard that once lived in Australia during prehistoric times. It belonged to a group of reptiles known as monitor lizards, which still exist today in smaller forms. Megalania lived in a world filled with large animals, changing climates, and wide landscapes that supported many kinds of life. Its body structure, movement ability, feeding behavior, and survival patterns show how it functioned as a powerful reptile in its environment. The body of Megalania was built with a long frame supported by strong bones. Fossil evidence shows that it had a long tail that formed a large portion of its total body length. The tail was muscular and flexible, allowing it to balance its body while moving across land surfaces. The limbs were thick and positioned to support heavy weight. Each limb ended in sharp claws that helped in gripping soil, climbing uneven ground, and holding onto prey during feeding. The skull was large with strong jaw bones designed for holding and breaking down flesh. The teeth were curved and sharp, arranged in a way that allowed repeated gripping actions during biting. The skin of Megalania was covered in scales. These scales formed a protective layer that reduced damage from environmental contact and from struggles during feeding. The surface of the skin helped reduce water loss in dry conditions, which was important for survival in regions where water sources were not always constant. The body temperature of Megalania depended on external heat sources. Sunlight played a central role in regulating its activity levels. During warm periods of the day, it could become more active and move across its territory. During cooler periods, its movement likely slowed as it managed internal body temperature. The head of Megalania contained sensory systems that allowed it to detect movement, smell, and environmental changes. The nostrils were positioned to help it pick up scents carried by air currents. The tongue was long and forked, used for collecting chemical signals from the environment. These signals were processed through a specialized organ in the roof of the mouth, allowing it to interpret information about nearby animals, food sources, and environmental changes. The eyes were positioned on the front and sides of the head, giving a wide field of vision that supported awareness of surroundings. Megalania lived in areas that included forests, open woodlands, and dry landscapes. These environments provided a mixture of cover and open ground. Trees and shrubs offered shade and shelter, while open areas allowed movement and tracking of prey. Water sources such as rivers, lakes, and seasonal pools were important locations within its habitat. These areas attracted other animals, which created feeding opportunities. The movement of Megalania was slow and controlled in many situations. Its limbs supported a heavy body, which required careful placement of each step. When moving through dense vegetation or rocky terrain, it used its claws to stabilize itself. In open areas, it could increase its pace for short periods when necessary. The tail played an important role in maintaining balance during movement. It also helped stabilize the body when turning or changing direction. The feeding behavior of Megalania was based on carnivorous habits. It consumed animal flesh and relied on hunting or scavenging for food. Its teeth were designed to grip and tear tissue. The jaw muscles provided strong biting force, allowing it to hold on to prey once contact was made. Feeding behavior likely included both active pursuit and waiting strategies. In some situations, it may have remained still while observing movement in its surroundings. When an opportunity appeared, it could move forward and attempt to capture the animal. The hunting method of Megalania involved patience, sensory awareness, and sudden bursts of movement. It used scent detection to identify the presence of other animals. After detecting a target, it would move quietly and slowly to reduce detection. Its body position remained low to the ground during approach. Once within close range, it could quickly extend its body forward and attempt to bite and hold the target. The curved teeth helped maintain grip during struggle. The saliva of Megalania may have contained substances that affected prey after biting. This condition is based on studies of modern monitor lizards, which show bacterial and chemical components in saliva that can influence wounds. After a bite, the prey could become weakened over time, allowing Megalania to follow and continue feeding later. This type of feeding strategy reduced the need for continuous struggle after the initial attack. Megalania also likely used ambush behavior. It could remain motionless in areas where animals frequently passed. These areas included paths near water sources, feeding grounds, and shaded resting spots. Its coloration helped it blend with surroundings such as soil, dry leaves, and vegetation shadows. When prey came close, it could react quickly and attempt to capture it. The digestion system of Megalania was adapted for processing large amounts of protein. After consuming food, the stomach broke down tissue using strong digestive acids and enzymes. The energy obtained from food supported movement, growth, and body maintenance. Feeding events may not have needed to occur daily, as large meals could sustain it for extended periods. The reproductive behavior of Megalania involved egg laying. Female individuals likely searched for safe locations with soil or sand where eggs could be deposited. These locations needed stable temperature conditions to support development. After laying eggs, there is no evidence that long-term care was provided. The young would emerge after development inside the eggs and begin independent survival. Juvenile Megalania would have faced different challenges compared to adults, including finding food and avoiding larger threats in the environment. The growth process of Megalania involved gradual development. Young individuals would start with smaller body size and develop stronger bones, muscles, and teeth over time. Growth depended on food availability and environmental conditions. As body size increased, feeding ability also increased, allowing access to a wider range of food sources. The fossil record of Megalania includes bones found in different parts of Australia. These fossils include vertebrae, limb bones, jaw fragments, and teeth. Each fossil provides information about structure and movement ability. The arrangement of bones shows how the body supported weight and allowed movement. The shape of teeth provides insight into feeding behavior and diet. Fossils are often found in sediment layers that indicate ancient environments such as river systems and dry land regions. The classification of Megalania places it within the monitor lizard group. This group includes modern species that share similar anatomical features. The scientific naming system identifies Megalania as Varanus priscus, linking it to its broader biological family. The structure of its bones and skull matches characteristics seen in monitor lizards, confirming its placement in this group. The sensory abilities of Megalania played an important role in survival. Smell detection allowed it to locate animals even when they were not visible. Movement detection through vision allowed it to notice changes in surroundings. The forked tongue allowed continuous sampling of environmental chemicals, providing information about nearby life activity. These sensory systems worked together to support hunting and navigation. The environment where Megalania lived changed over time. Climate shifts influenced the availability of water, vegetation, and animal populations. Dry periods may have reduced certain food sources, while wetter periods increased availability of prey. Megalania adapted to these changes through flexible feeding behavior and movement across different regions. The structure of its limbs shows adaptation for land movement. The bones in the legs were strong and connected to large muscle groups. These muscles provided support for lifting the body and moving across uneven ground. The claws were curved and sharp, useful for gripping surfaces and holding prey during feeding. The joints allowed controlled movement of the limbs, supporting both walking and short bursts of speed. The skull of Megalania was reinforced with strong bone structure. The jaw was capable of opening widely to allow ingestion of large pieces of food. The teeth were positioned to prevent escape of captured prey. The bite action involved closing the jaws with force and maintaining pressure to secure the hold. Repeated biting actions could be used to weaken prey before feeding continued. The tail was long and flexible, with muscle groups that allowed movement in multiple directions. It supported balance during walking and turning. It also helped distribute weight across the body. During rapid movement, the tail provided stability, preventing loss of control. The skin texture of Megalania included overlapping scales that formed a protective layer. These scales helped reduce damage from environmental contact. They also provided some resistance during physical struggle with prey. The pattern of scales may have varied across the body, with different arrangements on the back, limbs, and tail. Megalania likely spent time both active and resting. Resting periods allowed energy conservation. During these periods, it could remain still in shaded or sheltered locations. Activity periods were influenced by temperature and environmental conditions. Movement increased during suitable conditions when external heat supported body function. The interaction of Megalania with other animals included both hunting and scavenging. It could consume remains of dead animals when available. This feeding behavior reduced energy use compared to active hunting. When hunting, it focused on animals within reach that could be captured through sudden movement or sustained tracking. The brain of Megalania controlled sensory processing, movement coordination, and feeding behavior. It processed information from eyes, nose, and tongue to guide actions. Coordination between muscles and sensory input allowed controlled movement during hunting and navigation. The environment of prehistoric Australia included a wide range of landscapes that supported Megalania's lifestyle. These landscapes included forested regions with dense plant growth, open plains with scattered vegetation, and dry areas with limited plant cover. Each environment required adaptation in movement and feeding behavior. Ancient seas held a wide range of large marine animals that lived across very long periods of Earth's history. Among these animals were many types of sharks that developed strong bodies, large jaws, sharp teeth, and powerful senses that allowed them to move through deep and shallow waters while searching for food. These sharks lived during times when oceans covered large parts of the planet, and the water conditions changed slowly over very long stretches of time. Their bodies were shaped by the need to survive in environments where food sources were spread across wide areas, and where many other marine animals also competed for the same resources. The history of these sharks stretches across millions of years, with different groups appearing and disappearing as the planet changed. Many prehistoric sharks had body structures that allowed them to move efficiently through water. Their skeletons were made of cartilage instead of hard bone, which made their bodies lighter and more flexible. This structure helped them move in different directions while swimming through deep ocean layers or closer to the surface. Their skin had small, rough structures that reduced resistance in water, allowing smoother movement during long travel. Their fins were shaped in ways that helped with balance and direction control. The tail region was especially important for movement, giving them strong forward motion during swimming. These features were important for survival in waters where they needed to search for food over large distances. The senses of these sharks were highly developed. They could detect movement in water through vibrations. This ability helped them notice other animals even when they were not visible. Their smell was also highly sensitive, allowing them to detect small traces of biological material in water. This was useful in large ocean environments where visibility could change due to depth, sediment, or water movement. Their eyesight varied depending on species and depth of habitat. Some sharks lived in deeper waters where light was limited, and their eyes adapted to low light conditions. Others lived closer to the surface where light was more available, and their vision supported tracking moving prey. The teeth of prehistoric sharks were arranged in multiple rows. As teeth wore down or broke, new teeth moved forward to replace them. This continuous replacement system ensured that they always had functional teeth available. The shape of teeth varied depending on feeding habits. Some sharks had sharp, pointed teeth that could hold onto soft-bodied marine animals. Others had broader and stronger teeth that could handle harder materials. The arrangement of teeth allowed them to capture and process different types of food depending on what was available in their environment. During prehistoric times, ocean ecosystems contained many types of marine animals that served as food sources for large sharks. These included fish of different sizes, marine reptiles in certain periods, smaller sharks, and various invertebrates. The availability of food depended on ocean conditions, temperature, and biological activity in different regions. Sharks moved across regions following patterns of food availability, using their senses to locate areas where marine life was active. These movements were not random, but influenced by environmental conditions such as water temperature changes, ocean currents, and seasonal shifts in marine activity. Some prehistoric sharks reached extremely large body sizes. These sharks developed over long periods of evolutionary change, adapting to available food sources and environmental conditions. Their size allowed them to handle a wide range of marine prey. Their jaws were structured to open widely, enabling them to take in large amounts of water and capture prey during feeding movements. The muscles that controlled their jaws were strong and supported rapid movement. When feeding, water and prey entered the mouth, and the teeth helped secure the food before it was processed further. The ocean environments where these sharks lived were not uniform. There were shallow coastal regions, deep open waters, and areas with underwater terrain such as ridges and slopes. Each of these environments contained different types of marine life. Coastal areas often had higher biological activity due to nutrient availability, which supported fish populations and smaller marine animals. Deep waters contained organisms adapted to low light and high pressure conditions. Sharks moved between these environments depending on their biological needs and feeding behavior. In prehistoric seas, competition for food was common. Many marine predators existed at the same time, including large fish, marine reptiles in certain geological periods, and other shark species. Each predator had adaptations suited for specific feeding strategies. Some sharks focused on fast movement to capture active prey, while others used slower approaches combined with sudden bursts of speed. Some species relied on sensing vibrations from long distances, while others used close-range detection. These differences allowed multiple predator species to exist within the same ecosystems while targeting different types of prey or using different hunting approaches. The body structure of sharks supported endurance in long-distance swimming. Their muscles were arranged to allow continuous movement without frequent rest. This was important in large ocean environments where food sources were spread apart. Energy efficiency and movement allowed them to travel long distances while conserving strength for feeding activity. Their respiratory system required constant water movement over their gills, which meant they needed to keep swimming. This requirement influenced their behavior and movement patterns across different ocean regions. During periods of environmental change in Earth's history, ocean conditions shifted due to changes in temperature, sea levels, and continental positions. These changes affected marine ecosystems and the distribution of sharks and their prey. When sea levels rose, shallow marine environments expanded, creating new habitats for marine life. When sea levels fell, some shallow habitats disappeared, forcing marine animals to adapt or move to different regions. Sharks responded to these changes by shifting their movement patterns and adjusting feeding behavior based on available resources. The fossil record shows that prehistoric sharks existed across many different geological periods. Their remains are often found in sedimentary rock layers that were once ancient seafloors. Most shark fossils are teeth, because cartilage does not preserve easily over long periods of time. These teeth provide information about the size, shape, and feeding behavior of different shark species. By studying these remains, it is possible to understand how sharks changed over time and how different groups adapted to changing ocean conditions. Some shark species had long lifespans, allowing them to grow slowly and reach large sizes over many years. Growth rates depended on environmental conditions and food availability. In nutrient-rich environments, sharks could grow at faster rates due to abundant food sources. In less productive environments, growth could be slower. These differences influence the overall structure of shark populations in different marine regions. Reproduction in prehistoric sharks involved internal fertilization, similar to modern sharks. After fertilization, embryos developed inside the body of the mother or in protective egg cases depending on the species. The number of offspring varied widely among species. Some produced many young at once, while others produced fewer offspring with more developed features at birth or hatching. These reproductive strategies were influenced by environmental conditions and survival rates of young sharks in marine ecosystems. Young sharks often occupied different ecological roles compared to adults. Smaller size allowed them to live in different habitats, often closer to coastal areas or protected marine environments where they could avoid larger predators. As they grew, they gradually moved into deeper or more open waters where adult feeding behavior occurred. This transition required adaptation to new environments and changes in feeding patterns. The sensory system of sharks included specialized structures that detected electrical signals produced by other animals. This ability allowed them to locate prey even when visibility was limited. Electrical signals are produced by muscle movement in living organisms, and sharks could sense these signals through small receptors located in their heads. This adaptation was especially useful in deep or murky waters where visual detection was less effective. In prehistoric oceans, marine food chains were complex. Small organisms formed the base of the food system, supporting larger fish and marine animals. Sharks occupied higher positions in these food systems, feeding on a variety of organisms depending on their size and species. Some sharks focused on fish populations, while others included marine mammals in later geological periods. Their feeding behavior influenced the structure of marine ecosystems by regulating population levels of other species. Some prehistoric sharks had wide geographic distributions, appearing in different ocean regions across the planet. Their ability to move across large distances allowed them to occupy multiple habitats. Ocean currents played a role in their movement, influencing migration patterns and distribution of food sources. Temperature changes also influenced where they could live, as different shark species had specific ranges of temperature tolerance. The jaws of large prehistoric sharks were capable of generating strong force during feeding. This allowed them to capture and process large or resistant prey. Jaw structure included muscles and cartilage arrangements that supported rapid opening and closing movements. The arrangement of teeth worked together with jaw motion to secure food during feeding events. Feeding behavior often involved short bursts of activity, followed by periods of swimming and searching. The development of these sharks over time shows gradual changes in body structure, feeding behavior, and ecological role. Different lineages appeared and disappeared as environmental conditions shifted. Some groups developed larger sizes, while others remained relatively small but highly specialized. These changes reflect long-term adaptation to marine environments that were constantly changing in subtle ways over long periods of time. Ocean chemistry during prehistoric periods also influenced marine life. Changes in oxygen levels, temperature, and nutrient availability affected the distribution of marine organisms. Sharks adapted to these conditions through changes in behavior and physiology. Their ability to move across different depths allowed them to find suitable environments, even when surface conditions changed. Deep waters sometimes provided stable environments where temperature and oxygen levels were more consistent. The interaction between sharks and other marine animals shaped ecological relationships in ancient seas. Predatory behavior influenced the evolution of prey species, which developed different methods of movement, defense, and survival. This ongoing interaction contributed to diversity within marine ecosystems. Sharks remained part of this system through continuous adaptation to changing prey availability and environmental conditions. Some sharks lived in environments where light penetration was extremely limited. In these deep regions, sensory systems based on vibration and electrical detection were especially important. Movement in these waters required careful energy use, as food sources were less frequent. Sharks in these environments often had slower movement patterns and specialized feeding strategies adapted to scarce resources. In shallow marine environments, conditions were different. Light availability supported higher biological activity, and many species of fish and marine animals were present. Sharks in these regions often had faster movement patterns and more active feeding behavior due to higher prey availability. These environments supported complex interactions between predators and prey, with continuous movement and feeding activity occurring throughout different times. Over long periods, extinction events affected marine ecosystems. Some shark species disappeared during these events, while others survived and adapted to new conditions. These changes reshaped marine biodiversity and led to new forms of shark development in later periods. Environmental shifts following these events created opportunities for new species to develop and occupy ecological roles previously held by other organisms. The structural design of prehistoric sharks allowed them to remain effective predators across many different marine environments. Their combination of sensory ability, movement efficiency, feeding structures, and reproductive strategies supported survival in changing oceans. These characteristics remained consistent across many species, while still allowing variation that supported adaptation to specific environments and ecological roles. Thylacoleo was one of the most powerful carnivorous mammals that lived in ancient Australia. It belonged to a group of animals called marsupials, which are mammals that carry and feed their young in a pouch during early development. This animal lived many thousands of years ago during the late Pleistocene period, a time when Australia had many large and unusual animals living across its landscapes. Its remains have been found in caves, fossil sites, and ancient deposits, giving scientists detailed information about its body structure, behavior, and way of life. Thylacoleo had a body built for strong physical activity. It had a compact and muscular frame supported by powerful limbs. Its front limbs were especially strong and were capable of holding, pulling, and controlling prey. The claws on its front feet were large, curved, and sharp, allowing it to grip firmly into surfaces and hold struggling animals. Its hind limbs were also strong, giving it stability and balance during movement and when it positioned itself for action. The tail of Thylacoleo was thick and stiff in structure, helping it maintain balance when moving or lifting its body in different positions. The skull of Thylacoleo shows that it had a very strong jaw system. Its head was large in proportion to its body, and the bones of the skull were thick and heavily reinforced. The jaw muscles were attached to wide areas of the skull, allowing strong biting force. The teeth were highly specialized. Unlike many other carnivorous mammals, Thylacoleo did not have a full set of long, pointed canine teeth. Instead, it had sharp cutting teeth at the front and slicing teeth at the sides of the mouth. These teeth worked together to break through flesh and bone. The structure of its teeth shows that it could handle tough material and process food efficiently. The eyes of Thylacoleo were positioned toward the front of the skull, giving it strong depth perception. This would have helped it judge distance when moving through trees or rocky environments and when targeting prey. Its sense of sight likely played an important role in detecting movement, especially in low-light conditions such as early morning or late evening. The brain size of Thylacoleo was moderate compared to its body, suggesting it had basic but effective control over movement, coordination, and hunting behavior. The environment where Thylacoleo lived was diverse. Ancient Australia had regions of forest, woodland, grassland, and dry landscapes. Water sources such as rivers, lakes, and seasonal pools supported many animals. Thylacoleo likely used different parts of these environments depending on food availability and shelter needs. Fossil evidence shows that it was capable of climbing and moving in elevated areas, including trees and rocky formations. This ability gave it access to different locations where animals might have rested or moved through. The limbs of Thylacoleo show special adaptations for climbing and gripping. Its paws had semi-opposable thumbs, meaning the first digit on its front limbs could move in a way that helped grasp branches or surfaces. This feature is unusual among large carnivorous mammals, and suggests a unique way of moving through its environment. The claws were retractable to some extent, helping to keep them sharp and ready for use. The muscles in the shoulders and arms were highly developed, supporting powerful upward and downward movement. Thylacoleo likely used its climbing ability to move through trees or elevated surfaces to access resting animals or to travel across its habitat. Fossil evidence from caves indicates that it also used caves as resting or shelter areas. Some caves have bones of Thylacoleo along with remains of other animals, suggesting that these locations were part of its territory. The structure of its limbs supports the idea that it could climb vertically and descend carefully when needed. The diet of Thylacoleo consisted mainly of meat from other animals. Its teeth and jaw structure show clear adaptation for slicing flesh and breaking bones. The strong bite force allowed it to process large portions of food efficiently. It likely fed on a range of animals depending on what was available in its environment. These may have included large herbivorous marsupials, smaller mammals, and possibly young or weakened individuals of larger species. Its feeding behavior would have depended on opportunity and physical capability. The hunting behavior of Thylacoleo involved a combination of strength, speed over short distances, and precise movement. It may have used its climbing ability to approach animals from elevated positions or to wait in hidden areas. Once close enough, it could use its front limbs to seize and hold prey while delivering a strong bite. The structure of its claws and jaw suggests that it could maintain a firm grip while applying pressure with its bite. This combination of physical features made it effective in capturing and processing food. Fossilized remains show evidence of strong muscle attachment points on the bones of Thylacoleo. These attachment points indicate that it had powerful muscles in the neck, shoulders, and limbs. The strength of these muscles would have supported rapid movement and controlled force during feeding and movement. The spine of Thylacoleo was flexible enough to allow twisting and turning, which would have helped in adjusting body position when handling prey or moving through complex terrain. The reproductive behavior of Thylacoleo followed the pattern of marsupials. The young were born at a very early stage of development and continued growing in the mother's pouch. Inside the pouch, the young received milk and protection while they developed further. As they grew, they gradually became more independent and began exploring the environment under the guidance of the mother. The survival of young Thylacoleo depended heavily on protection during early life stages, as they were vulnerable to environmental dangers and other animals. The growth of Thylacoleo from juvenile to adult involved gradual strengthening of bones, muscles, and teeth. Young individuals would have learned movement and hunting-related behavior through observation and practice. As they matured, their physical strength increased, allowing them to handle larger prey and move more confidently across different terrains. The development process required sufficient food intake and safe environments where young individuals could grow without constant threats. Thylacoleo lived during a time when Australia had many large animal species. These animals included giant marsupials, large birds, and reptiles. The presence of many different species created a complex ecosystem with various interactions. Thylacoleo played an important role in this ecosystem as a meat-eating predator. It influenced the movement, behavior, and population of other animals by its presence and feeding activity. The fossil record shows that Thylacoleo existed across a wide geographic range in Australia. Its remains have been found in different regions, suggesting it adapted to multiple environments. This wide distribution indicates that it was capable of surviving in varying conditions, including dry inland areas and more vegetated regions. Its ability to climb and move across different surfaces may have contributed to this wide range. The skeletal structure of Thylacoleo provides important information about its movement. Its shoulder blades were large and positioned in a way that allowed strong forward and upward motion. The forearms were shorter but very strong, suggesting they were used more for power than speed over long distances. The hind limbs supported stability and controlled movement. The overall body structure shows that it was not built for long continuous running, but for controlled and powerful movement in short bursts. The claws of Thylacoleo were one of its most important physical features. They were curved and sharp, designed to grip into surfaces and hold firmly. These claws could have been used for climbing trees, holding onto branches, and securing prey during feeding. The ability to use claws effectively required coordination between muscles and nerves, showing that Thylacoleo had developed motor control suited to its lifestyle. The sensory abilities of Thylacoleo included hearing and smell in addition to sight. Its inner ear structure suggests that it could detect a range of sounds, helping it notice movement in its environment. The sense of smell likely helped it locate food sources or detect the presence of other animals nearby. These senses worked together to support survival in different conditions. The fossilized bones of Thylacoleo also show signs of wear and stress in some individuals. This indicates that they engaged in physically demanding activity throughout their lives. The wear patterns on teeth suggest repeated use in cutting and processing tough material. The bones also show signs of healing in some cases, suggesting that individuals sometimes survived injuries and continued living afterward. The interaction of Thylacoleo with other animals in its environment was shaped by competition for food and space. Many herbivorous animals moved across the same regions, feeding on vegetation and water sources. Thylacoleo's presence influenced their movement patterns and behavior. Smaller animals may have adapted their activity times or locations based on the presence of larger predators. The climate during the time of Thylacoleo varied across regions and over long periods. Some areas experienced wetter conditions with more vegetation, while others were dry with sparse plant life. These changes affected the availability of food and shelter for all animals, including Thylacoleo. Its ability to move across different environments allowed it to survive during changes in climate conditions. The structure of the digestive system of Thylacoleo is not fully known, but based on its teeth and skull, it likely processed meat efficiently. The cutting teeth suggest that it could break down flesh into manageable pieces. The jaw strength indicates that it could handle tough material. After feeding, digestion would have taken place in the stomach and intestines, absorbing nutrients needed for energy and growth. The posture of Thylacoleo during movement would have involved a low and stable body position. Its limbs supported weight close to the ground or when climbing. When resting, it may have positioned itself in secure locations such as caves or elevated areas. Fossil evidence from cave sites supports the idea that it used sheltered spaces regularly. The evolutionary history of Thylacoleo is part of the broader development of marsupials in Australia. Over long periods of time, marsupials developed different adaptations to fill various ecological roles. Thylacoleo developed into a large meat-eating species with specialized features that supported its way of life. Its lineage shows how marsupials adapted to different environmental conditions and survival needs. The fossil discoveries of Thylacoleo include bones, skulls, and sometimes nearly complete skeletons. These findings allow scientists to reconstruct its appearance and understand how it moved and lived. Some fossils have been found in deep cave systems, suggesting that these environments were important in its life history. The preservation of bones in these locations provides valuable information about its structure. The muscle strength of Thylacoleo was concentrated in key areas that supported movement and feeding. The neck muscles allowed head movement and strong biting action. The shoulder and arm muscles supported gripping and pulling. The hind limb muscles supported balance and movement across different surfaces. The coordination of these muscle groups allowed controlled physical activity. The brain structure of Thylacoleo indicates that it had regions associated with movement control, sensory processing, and basic behavior patterns. While not highly complex in structure, it was sufficient for survival activities such as movement, feeding, and interaction with its environment. Neural pathways allowed coordination between sensory input and physical response. The extinction of Thylacoleo occurred after long periods of environmental change. Changes in climate, vegetation, and animal populations affected its survival conditions. The reduction of suitable habitats and changes in food availability contributed to its disappearance from the environment. Fossil records show that it existed for a long period before its final absence from the ecosystem. Venomous snakes in ancient times were part of a long natural history that stretched across many millions of years. These snakes developed in environments that changed slowly over very long periods of time. Their bodies developed special systems that allowed them to survive in different climates, different landforms, and different ecosystems. Their existence is recorded through fossils, preserved remains, and genetic links that connect them to modern snakes. Ancient venomous snakes show how life adapted to feeding needs, survival pressures, and environmental shifts. The earliest venomous snakes appeared after long periods of reptile evolution. Early snake ancestors had limbs, but over time these limbs reduced and eventually disappeared. The body became long and flexible, allowing movement through soil, vegetation, and narrow spaces. This body shape supported hunting methods that involved close contact with prey. Venom became an important biological development that allowed these snakes to immobilize prey and begin digestion in a controlled way. The development of venom systems involved changes in glands, muscle control, and dental structures. Venom glands developed from modified salivary glands. These glands produced proteins and enzymes that could affect the nervous system, blood system, or tissue structure of other animals. Over long periods, the chemical compounds inside venom became more complex. Different ancient snake lineages developed different venom compositions. Some venoms affected nerve signals, leading to loss of muscle control. Some venoms affected blood clotting systems, leading to internal bleeding. Some venoms broke down tissue structures, making it easier for digestion to begin. Fangs developed as specialized teeth that allowed venom delivery into prey. Early fang structures were not fully hollow in many ancient species. Instead, grooves formed along the teeth that allowed venom to travel into wounds. Over time, more advanced fang systems developed. Some ancient snakes developed front fangs connected to venom channels. Others developed rear fangs that delivered venom when prey was held in the mouth for a period of time. These fang systems showed variation across different ancient groups. The skeletal structure of venomous snakes also developed adaptations. The skull became flexible, allowing wide opening of the mouth. This allowed ingestion of prey that was larger than the width of the head. Jawbones were connected by flexible ligaments. These ligaments allowed movement during feeding. Teeth were replaced regularly throughout life, ensuring that venom delivery systems remained functional. Ancient venomous snakes lived in environments that included dense forests, open land areas, wetlands, and coastal regions. These environments contained many types of prey, including early mammals, amphibians, reptiles, and large insects. Venomous snakes occupied roles as predators that controlled population levels of other animals. Their hunting method involved sensing movement, striking quickly, and delivering venom through fangs. After venom delivery, snakes often waited until prey movement stopped before feeding began. Sensory systems in ancient venomous snakes developed to support hunting behavior. Chemical detection through tongue flicking allowed these snakes to gather particles from the air and ground. These particles were transferred to a sensory organ located in the mouth. This organ processed chemical signals and helped identify prey location. Heat-sensing ability developed in some ancient lineages. This allowed detection of warm-blooded animals through temperature differences in the environment. Venom production required energy and biological resources. Snake bodies allocated resources to maintain venom glands and produce venom proteins. The structure of venom changed depending on diet and environment. Snakes that fed on different types of prey developed different venom compositions. This variation allowed adaptation to specific ecological niches. Some ancient snakes had venom that acted quickly. Others had venom that acted slowly over longer periods. The fossil record shows ancient venomous snakes in different geological layers. These layers represent long periods of Earth history. Fossils include vertebrae, skull fragments, and sometimes preserved fang structures. Fossil evidence shows that venomous snakes existed in multiple continents. Continental movement over long periods allowed distribution of snake lineages into different regions. Climate changes also influenced where snakes could survive. Reproduction in ancient venomous snakes involved laying eggs or giving birth to live young, depending on lineage. Egg-laying species deposited eggs in protected environments such as soil or vegetation. Temperature and humidity affected development inside the eggs. Live-bearing species retained embryos inside the body until development was complete. This reproductive variation supported survival in different environmental conditions. Growth in venomous snakes involved repeated shedding of skin. This process allowed body expansion and removal of parasites or damaged skin layers. Juvenile snakes were often capable of producing venom shortly after birth or hatching. Venom systems were functional early in life, allowing young snakes to hunt small prey. Ancient venomous snakes developed defensive behaviors in addition to hunting abilities. When threatened, some snakes remained still to avoid detection. Others used rapid movement to escape. Some used warning displays involving body posture changes or sounds produced by air movement through body structures. Venom also functioned as a defense mechanism against larger predators. The structure of venom glands included storage areas, secretion ducts, and muscular systems that controlled venom release. Muscles surrounding the glands contracted during a bite, forcing venom through ducts and into fang channels. Control of venom release allowed regulation of dosage depending on prey size and condition. This regulation helped conserve venom resources. Ancient ecosystems that included venomous snakes had complex food networks. Snakes interacted with many types of organisms. Prey animals developed behaviors that reduced risk of snake encounters. Some prey animals increased vigilance and movement patterns. Others developed physical traits that reduced vulnerability to bites. These interactions influenced long-term biological development. Venom composition involved proteins such as enzymes and peptides. These molecules affected biological systems in prey animals. Enzymes broke down proteins, fats, and other cellular structures. Some venom components interfered with nerve communication pathways. These chemical actions allowed snakes to immobilize prey efficiently. Different ancient snake groups developed different fang positions. Some had fangs located at the front of the mouth near the upper jaw. Others had fangs located further back. Front fang systems allowed direct injection of venom during initial contact. Rear fang systems required prey to be held for venom delivery. These differences reflect variation in evolutionary development. The nervous system of venomous snakes controlled movement patterns that supported hunting. Muscles along the body worked in coordinated sequences. Movement allowed silent approach toward prey. Sudden strikes were controlled by rapid muscle contraction. These movements required precise coordination between sensory input and motor output. Ancient venomous snakes also developed metabolic systems that supported energy use during hunting. Energy was stored and used during periods of activity. After feeding, digestion involved chemical processes that broke down prey tissues into nutrients. These nutrients supported growth and reproduction. Environmental changes over long periods influenced venomous snake populations. Changes in temperature, vegetation, and water availability affected prey distribution. Snake populations adjusted movement patterns and hunting strategies in response to these changes. Some populations expanded into new regions when conditions allowed. Others reduced population size during periods of environmental stress. Venom evolution involved gene changes that affected protein production. Genetic variations allowed new venom types to develop. These changes accumulated over long periods, leading to diversity in venom systems. Some venom proteins became specialized for specific prey types. This specialization supported survival in competitive environments. Ancient venomous snakes also show evidence of interaction with other predators. Competition for prey influenced hunting timing and behavior. Some snakes became active during specific periods of the day or night. This timing reduced direct encounters with other predators and increased hunting success. The body length of ancient venomous snakes varied across species. Some were small and adapted to narrow spaces. Others developed larger bodies that allowed hunting of larger prey. Body size influenced energy requirements, movement patterns, and prey selection. Growth patterns depended on food availability and environmental stability. Skin structure in venomous snakes included scales that protected the body and supported movement. Scales reduced friction during movement across surfaces. Scale patterns varied among different ancient groups. These patterns are preserved in some fossil impressions. Ancient venomous snakes also developed specialized glands for scent release in some lineages. These glands produced chemical signals used for communication. Communication signals influenced mating behavior and territorial presence. Reproductive behavior included courtship movements and chemical signaling. Venomous snakes played roles in controlling populations of other animals. This control influenced ecological balance within environments. Predation pressure influenced evolution of prey species. Over long periods, this interaction contributed to biological diversity. Some ancient venomous snakes developed adaptations for aquatic environments. These snakes moved through water using body undulation. Hunting in water involved detection of movement and rapid striking. Aquatic environments included rivers, lakes, and coastal regions. Other ancient venomous snakes adapted to underground environments. These snakes moved through soil and loose ground material. Underground movement required specialized body flexibility and sensory adaptation. Prey detection in underground environments relied heavily on chemical sensing. Venomous spiders and insects in prehistoric times were part of many ancient ecosystems that existed millions of years ago. These creatures lived in environments that were often filled with dense vegetation, changing climates, volcanic activity in some regions, shifting land surfaces, and large populations of other living organisms competing for survival. Arachnids and insects developed different biological systems that allowed them to feed, defend themselves, and survive in conditions that change slowly over extremely long periods of time. Among these systems, venom production became one of the most important biological tools for certain groups. Venom helped them capture prey, reduce resistance from other organisms, and protect themselves from threats in their surroundings. In prehistoric ecosystems, insects had already existed for hundreds of millions of years, long before many modern animal groups appeared. Arachnids, which include spiders, scorpions, and related organisms, also had a long evolutionary history that stretched far back in time. Fossil evidence shows that early forms of these creatures were present in ancient forests, swampy regions, and coastal environments. These habitats provided moisture, shelter, and food sources that allowed small arthropods to expand into many ecological roles. Over time, some of these organisms developed venom systems that became part of their survival strategies. Venom in prehistoric spiders and insects was a chemical mixture produced inside specialized glands. These glands were connected to structures such as fangs in spiders or stingers in insects. The venom contained proteins, enzymes, and other compounds that affected the nervous systems or tissues of other organisms. In many cases, venom acted quickly after being delivered into prey or a threat organism. This allowed the predator to reduce movement in the target organism, making feeding or escape avoidance possible. Prehistoric spiders developed a wide range of forms, some of which lived in tree environments, while others lived in soil, leaf litter, or near water sources. Their silk production system allowed them to create threads used for shelter, egg protection, and prey capture. In venomous species, silk and venom worked together in the process of feeding. When prey became trapped in silk threads, the spider used its fangs to inject venom. The venom began to affect the internal systems of the prey organism, which reduced movement and allowed the spider to feed. Fossil records show that ancient spiders existed during periods when forests contained giant ferns, tall, primitive trees, and dense undergrowth. These environments provided many hiding places for spiders and insects. Moist conditions in many prehistoric regions allowed arthropods to thrive. Some fossilized spiders show body structures similar to modern spiders, including segmented bodies and jointed legs. Venomous adaptations may have appeared early in their development, since even simple venom systems could provide strong survival benefits. Insects also developed venom systems in several groups. Some of the earliest venomous insects include ancestors of modern wasps, ants, and beetles. These insects used venom for hunting, defense, and controlling other organisms. In many cases, insect venom was delivered through stingers or biting mouthparts. The venom contained chemical substances that caused pain, paralysis, or tissue damage in affected organisms. This allowed insects to manage prey that might otherwise be difficult to control due to size or movement. During prehistoric periods, insect diversity increased greatly. Many ecosystems supported large populations of flying insects, crawling insects, and burrowing insects. Forests, wetlands, and open land areas provided different habitats that allowed insect groups to specialize in different ways of life. Some insects developed social structures, while others lived alone. Venomous insects often used their venom both for hunting small organisms and for defending themselves from predators. Arachnids such as scorpions also developed venom systems that played a central role in their survival. Scorpions existed in prehistoric times in many regions of the world. Fossils show that early scorpions had body structures similar to modern forms, including segmented tails ending in stingers. The stinger delivered venom that affected other organisms through injection. Scorpion venom was used for capturing prey, such as small arthropods and other small animals. It was also used when scorpions encountered threats. Some prehistoric scorpions lived in environments that were dry or semi-dry, while others lived in moist environments. Their ability to survive in different conditions shows that venom systems were effective tools for feeding and defense across multiple habitats. Scorpion venom acted on nerve signals or muscle systems of target organisms, reducing their ability to move or respond. This made feeding more efficient in environments where prey could escape quickly. Insects with venomous abilities included early ants, which developed complex social structures. These ants used venom not only for hunting, but also for protecting their colonies. In prehistoric environments, ant colonies could include large numbers of individuals working together. Venom allowed worker insects to defend the colony against intruders and also to capture small prey items. The venom was delivered through stingers or bites depending on the species. Beetles also appeared in prehistoric ecosystems, and some groups developed chemical defense systems that functioned in a similar way to venom. These chemical systems allowed beetles to release substances that affected other organisms when threatened. Some beetles had glands that stored defensive chemicals, which were released when the beetle was disturbed. These substances could cause irritation or harm to other organisms that attempted to attack or consume the beetle. Prehistoric environments contained many interactions between venomous arthropods and other living organisms. Small vertebrates, such as early amphibians, reptiles, and small mammals that appeared later in time, could encounter venomous spiders or insects. In many cases, these encounters influenced behavior patterns. Many animals developed avoidance responses toward arthropods that had stingers or biting structures capable of injecting venom. This reduced the chance of harmful encounters and influenced movement patterns within ecosystems. The development of venom systems in spiders and insects also involved changes in internal anatomy. Venom glands became more specialized over time, allowing for more controlled production and storage of venom. Delivery systems, such as fangs, stingers, and modified mouthparts, became more efficient at injecting venom into target organisms. These biological changes required long periods of gradual modification through natural biological processes across many generations. In prehistoric forests, insects occupied many levels of the ecosystem. Some insects lived on leaves, feeding on plant material. Others lived in soil, breaking down organic matter. Venomous insects often occupied roles as predators or defenders. Their venom allowed them to capture small prey or protect themselves from other predators. Spider populations also contributed to controlling insect populations through hunting behavior supported by venom use. Fossilized amber has preserved many prehistoric insects and spiders. Amber is fossilized tree resin that trapped small organisms and preserved them in detail. These fossils provide evidence of body structures, wing shapes, leg arrangement, and sometimes even internal details. Some preserved specimens show evidence of venom delivery structures such as stingers or fangs. These fossils allow study of how venomous arthropods existed in ancient ecosystems and how they interacted with their environment. In many prehistoric ecosystems, climate changes influenced the distribution of spiders and insects. Periods of warmer and wetter conditions allowed arthropod populations to expand into new regions. Changes in vegetation also affected the availability of habitats. As plant life changed, insect populations adapted by changing feeding habits or movement patterns. Venomous species adapted by adjusting hunting strategies and defensive behaviors. Spiders in prehistoric times also showed variations in hunting methods supported by venom use. Some spiders built simple web structures to capture prey, while others relied on active hunting without webs. In both cases, venom remained important for immobilizing prey. The effectiveness of venom allowed spiders to handle prey organisms that resisted capture. Once venom was injected, prey movement reduced over time, allowing the spider to feed. Insects with venom systems also developed different feeding strategies. Some injected venom into prey while feeding, while others used venom primarily for defense. Insects that used venom for hunting often targeted smaller arthropods or soft-bodied organisms. The venom affected the internal systems of prey, making feeding easier. Defensive venom systems were used when insects encountered threats from larger organisms or competing arthropods. The prehistoric world also contained interactions between venomous arthropods and plant life. Some insects fed on plants but used venom mainly for defense. Plants in turn developed physical and chemical defenses that influenced insect feeding behavior. These interactions created complex relationships between plants and insects over long periods of time. Spiders were less directly involved with plants but often used plant structures for web building or shelter. Scorpions in prehistoric ecosystems often occupied ground-level environments. They hid under rocks, within soil cracks, and under plant debris. Their venom was used when prey came within reach. Scorpion hunting behavior involved waiting for prey to approach closely before using the stinger. Once venom was delivered, prey movement became restricted, allowing the scorpion to feed. This behavior remained effective in many environments over long periods of time. Some prehistoric insects also developed winged forms that allowed flight. Flight provided access to new habitats, food sources, and escape routes. Venomous flying insects could defend themselves while moving through air spaces or when landing on surfaces. Venom systems remained useful even when movement patterns expanded into three-dimensional space, such as air environments above forests or wetlands. Fossil evidence indicates that arthropod diversity increased significantly during different geological periods. As ecosystems became more complex, venom systems also diversified. Different chemical compositions of venom developed in different groups of spiders and insects. These chemical differences affected how venom interacted with target organisms, influencing feeding success and defense effectiveness. In prehistoric aquatic or semi-aquatic environments, some insects developed larval stages that lived in water. While venom was less common in aquatic stages, adult forms often developed venom systems that were used on land or air environments. Spiders and scorpions generally remained terrestrial, although some species adapted to environments near water sources. The evolution of venom in prehistoric spiders and insects required long-term changes in genetic structures that controlled protein production. These changes resulted in specialized glands capable of producing toxic substances in controlled amounts. The regulation of venom production was important, since producing chemical substances required energy and biological resources. Prehistoric ecosystems contained many small organisms that served as prey for venomous spiders and insects. These prey organisms included early insects, larvae, worms, and other arthropods. Venom allowed predators to handle prey efficiently in environments where escape chances were present. The presence of venom also influenced prey behavior, leading to avoidance patterns and changes in activity timing. Some fossil records suggest that large prehistoric arthropods existed in certain periods, although venomous spiders and insects generally remained small in body size. Despite smaller size, venom systems allowed these organisms to affect much larger biological interactions within ecosystems. Their role in controlling populations of other arthropods influenced the structure of food chains and biological networks. The spread of venomous spiders and insects across different regions of prehistoric Earth was influenced by land connections, climate patterns, and vegetation distribution. As continents shifted slowly over long periods, arthropods expanded into new environments. Each region contained unique ecological conditions that shaped the development of venom systems in local species. In forested prehistoric environments, leaf litter layers provided rich habitats for spiders and insects. These layers contained decomposing plant material and many small organisms. Venomous arthropods living in these areas had access to abundant prey resources. The dark and moist conditions also supported survival of delicate body structures and allowed hunting strategies based on hiding and sudden movement. Environmental hazards such as extreme droughts, wildfires, and cyclones have played a major role in shaping how humans and other living things have survived across long periods of time. These events are part of natural environmental processes that can bring sudden and severe changes to land, water, air, and living conditions. They often appear with different levels of strength and duration, and their effects can spread across large areas, affecting food sources, shelter, movement, and daily survival needs. Over many centuries and thousands of years, these hazards have influenced how people adapt to their surroundings, how communities are formed, and how life continues under difficult conditions. Extreme droughts are one of the most serious environmental hazards because they involve long periods without enough rainfall. When rainfall becomes very low or stops for a long time, water sources begin to reduce. Rivers may become shallow or dry, lakes may shrink, and soil may lose moisture. This change affects plants first, because plants depend on water to grow and remain healthy. When plants weaken, animals that depend on them for food also struggle to survive. Humans who depend on farming or natural water sources face shortages in crops and drinking water. During extreme drought conditions, the ground becomes dry and hard. Seeds find it difficult to sprout, and young plants often fail to grow. Farmers who depend on seasonal rains may lose entire harvests. Livestock animals may suffer from lack of pasture and water, leading to reduced health and reduced productivity. People living in affected areas may need to travel longer distances to find water, often relying on wells, rivers, or stored supplies that may also be limited. In many regions, drought conditions develop slowly over time, making it difficult to notice the early stages. At first, rainfall becomes less frequent. Then soil moisture begins to drop. As time continues, water sources reduce more noticeably. Communities may begin to adjust daily activities by saving water, changing farming schedules, or moving to other areas where water is still available. In severe situations, migration becomes necessary when local water sources can no longer support life. The effects of extreme droughts are not limited to surface water alone. Underground water sources can also become lower when they are used faster than they are replenished. Wells may dry up or require deeper digging. This can increase the effort needed to access water. In dry conditions, dust becomes more common in the air, and visibility can reduce in open environments. Dry soil can also break apart more easily, affecting land stability and making farming more difficult. Wildfires are another major environmental hazard that can change landscapes quickly. Wildfires involve uncontrolled burning of vegetation, forests, grasslands, and other natural areas. They often begin when dry conditions combine with heat and a source of ignition. Once started, fire can spread rapidly through dry plants, leaves, and trees. Wind can carry flames and burning particles across wide areas, increasing the reach of the fire. During wildfire events, temperatures in the affected area rise significantly. Vegetation dries out further, making it easier for fire to continue spreading. Smoke fills the air, reducing air quality and making breathing difficult for humans and animals. Many living creatures are forced to move quickly to escape the advancing fire. Those unable to move fast enough may become trapped in areas affected by flames. Wildfires can affect both natural environments and human settlements. Houses, farms, storage areas, and infrastructure can be damaged or destroyed when fire reaches them. Crops can be lost within short periods of time. Livestock animals may need to be moved quickly to safer areas. The ground after a wildfire often becomes covered with ash and burned material, which changes how soil absorbs water and supports plant growth. After fire passes through an area, the land may remain affected for a long time. New plant growth may be slow because seeds and roots have been damaged. Rainfall after a fire can also cause soil to wash away more easily because protective vegetation has been removed. This can lead to changes in land structure and can affect future farming or habitation in the area. Wildfires can also influence weather conditions in nearby regions. Smoke and particles released into the air can spread over long distances, reducing sunlight reaching the ground in some areas. This can affect temperature and visibility. Air quality changes can affect health conditions, especially for people with breathing difficulties or weakened immune systems. Cyclones are another powerful environmental hazard that can develop over large bodies of warm water. Cyclones involve strong rotating winds, heavy rainfall, and low atmospheric pressure. When they move toward land, they bring intense wind force and large amounts of rain. These conditions can last for hours or even days depending on the strength and size of the system. Strong winds during cyclones can break trees, damage buildings, and move objects with great force. Heavy rainfall can lead to flooding in low areas, filling rivers and drainage systems beyond their capacity. Coastal regions are often affected by rising sea levels during cyclone events, where water is pushed toward land by wind and pressure systems. Cyclones can affect transportation, communication, and access to resources. Roads may become blocked by fallen trees or floodwater. Power systems may fail when infrastructure is damaged. Communication lines may also be interrupted, making it difficult for people to coordinate safety measures or emergency responses. In farming regions, cyclones can damage crops by flattening fields or flooding agricultural land. Soil can become waterlogged, which reduces its ability to support plant growth. In some cases, saltwater from coastal flooding can enter freshwater systems and farmland, affecting soil quality and water usability. Cyclones also affect coastal ecosystems. Strong waves and storm surges can reshape shorelines, move large amounts of sand, and affect habitats near the coast. Fish and other aquatic life may be impacted by changes in water conditions, including temperature, salinity, and sediment levels. Across long periods of time, these environmental hazards have shaped how living beings adjust their behavior and survival methods. When droughts occur repeatedly, water management becomes more important. Communities learn to store water, find new sources, and use available water more carefully. Farming methods may shift toward crops that require less water or that can survive dry conditions. In regions where wildfires occur frequently, awareness of dry seasons becomes important. People adjust their activities to reduce exposure to fire risk during dry periods. Vegetation management becomes part of daily life in some areas, where dry plants are removed or controlled to reduce fire spread. Building structures may also be adjusted to reduce damage from fire exposure. In cyclone-prone areas, warning systems and preparation routines become essential. People monitor weather changes and prepare for strong winds and heavy rain by securing structures, protecting food and water supplies, and planning safer locations for shelter. Coastal communities often pay close attention to water movement and wind patterns to anticipate possible cyclone activity. Environmental hazards also influence movement of populations. When repeated droughts reduce agricultural productivity, people may move to areas with more reliable water sources. When wildfires destroy large areas of land, relocation may become necessary until conditions stabilize. When cyclones repeatedly affect coastal regions, communities may adjust settlement locations or building practices to reduce damage risk. The natural environment responds to these hazards in gradual and sometimes long-lasting ways. After drought periods, vegetation may slowly return when rainfall improves. After wildfires, new plant growth may begin from surviving seeds and roots, although the process can take time depending on soil conditions and moisture availability. After cyclones, landscapes may recover through natural regrowth, sediment movement, and water redistribution. Human activity and environmental hazards often interact in complex ways. Land use, water consumption, and settlement patterns can influence how strongly hazards are felt in certain regions. At the same time, natural cycles of weather and climate continue to produce droughts, wildfires, and cyclones in different parts of the world. These events remain part of environmental systems that operate over long periods. In dry regions, drought conditions may appear during specific seasonal patterns. Extended dry seasons can lead to increased stress on water supplies. Rivers that depend on rainfall or melting water sources may reduce flow levels. Ground conditions become more fragile, and vegetation growth slows down significantly. Communities in these regions often depend heavily on stored water and careful planning for dry periods. Wildfires often increase during periods of high temperature and low humidity. Dry vegetation becomes more sensitive to ignition sources such as lightning or human activity. Once fire begins, the availability of dry fuel determines how far and how fast it spreads. Wind conditions can further influence fire movement by carrying heat and burning material into new areas. Cyclones develop through interactions between ocean heat and atmospheric conditions. Warm ocean water provides energy that contributes to the formation of strong wind systems. As air rises and rotates, pressure differences increase, leading to stronger wind movement. When these systems reach land, the interaction with land surfaces reduces energy over time, but not before causing significant rainfall and wind effects. Mass extinctions are times in the history of life on Earth when a very large number of living things died within a relatively short period in geological terms. These events changed the living world in deep ways because many types of plants and animals disappeared completely, while others survived and continued into later times. Mass extinctions happened several times across Earth's long history, and they were caused by strong changes in the environment and also by the actions of predators that placed heavy pressure on living populations already struggling with difficult conditions. One of the main causes of mass extinctions is strong environmental change. The environment includes air, water, land, temperature, and all natural conditions that living things depend on. When these conditions change too quickly or too severely, many organisms cannot adjust in time. Long periods of rising heat or falling temperatures can make survival difficult for species that depend on stable conditions. When rainfall patterns change, rivers may dry up or flood too often, and plants that depend on regular water supply may begin to die. When plants reduce in number, animals that feed on them also begin to lose their food source, leading to a chain of death across many levels of life. Changes in temperature over long periods played a major role in mass extinctions. When Earth became much colder in certain eras, ice expanded over large areas, reducing the space available for many forms of life. Cold conditions slowed down plant growth and reduced food availability for herbivores. When Earth became much warmer in other eras, heat placed stress on living systems, dried out water sources, and reduced oxygen levels in some regions of the oceans. Many marine organisms depend on oxygen-rich water, and when oxygen levels drop, survival becomes difficult. These shifts in temperature affected both land and sea environments at the same time, making survival harder across the entire planet. Volcanic activity also contributed to mass extinctions. Large volcanic eruptions released huge amounts of gases and ash into the atmosphere. These gases included carbon dioxide and sulfur compounds. When these gases entered the atmosphere in large amounts, they changed air quality and affected climate conditions. Ash clouds blocked sunlight, which reduced the amount of light reaching plants. Plants need sunlight to grow, and when sunlight is reduced for long periods, plant life weakens. Weak plant life then affects animals that depend on it for food. Volcanic gases also changed the chemistry of oceans, making water conditions harmful for many marine species. Over time, these combined effects led to widespread loss of life. Another major cause of mass extinctions was the impact of large space objects such as asteroids. When a large asteroid struck Earth, it released a huge amount of energy. This energy caused fire, shock waves, and dust that spread into the atmosphere. The dust blocked sunlight for long periods, which reduced plant growth and disrupted food chains. Without sunlight, temperatures dropped in many regions, and ecosystems struggled to function. Ocean environments were also affected because changes in temperature and light reduced the ability of marine organisms to survive. These sudden changes placed extreme stress on living systems across the planet. Changes in sea level also played a role in mass extinctions. Sea levels rise and fall over long periods due to changes in ice volume and temperature. When sea levels rise, coastal areas are flooded, and habitats that many species depend on are lost. When sea levels fall, shallow sea environments shrink, and marine habitats become smaller. Many organisms that live in shallow waters are sensitive to these changes. When their habitats disappear or change too quickly, they cannot survive. This leads to a reduction in biodiversity in both marine and coastal environments. Ocean conditions are also very important in mass extinctions. The oceans hold a large portion of Earth's life. When ocean chemistry changes, many organisms are affected. One important change is the reduction of oxygen in ocean water. When oxygen levels drop, marine animals that depend on it cannot survive. Another change is increased acidity in water, which affects organisms with shells and skeletons made from minerals. When water becomes more acidic, these structures weaken and break down. These changes often spread across large ocean areas, affecting many species at once. Environmental change also affects soil conditions on land. Soil contains nutrients that plants need to grow. When climate conditions change, soil can become dry, too wet, or lose nutrients. Plants that depend on healthy soil begin to weaken and die. When plant life declines, animals that feed on plants lose their food supply. This affects animals that depend on those herbivores, creating pressure across many levels of life. Over long periods, this leads to major reductions in biodiversity. Predators also played an important role in mass extinctions. Predators are animals that hunt other animals for food. When environmental conditions are stable, predator and prey populations often remain balanced. However, during times of environmental stress, this balance can change. When prey animals become fewer due to climate change or habitat loss, predators may continue hunting the remaining populations. This increased pressure can lead to faster decline of already weakened species. When prey populations drop too low, predators also begin to suffer from lack of food, which can lead to their decline as well. In some cases, new predator species entering an environment caused additional pressure. When a new predator appears in a region, the animals in that region may not have natural defenses against it. This can lead to rapid reduction in prey populations. If the environment is already under stress from climate change or habitat loss, the added pressure from predators can contribute to faster extinction of vulnerable species. Predators also influence the structure of ecosystems. When predators remove large numbers of certain animals, they change the balance of species in an area. This can affect plant life as well, because herbivores that control plant growth may decrease or increase in number depending on predator activity. During periods of environmental stress, these changes become more severe because ecosystems are already weakened. The combined effect of environmental change and predator pressure increases the difficulty for many species to survive. Disease also played a role during mass extinction periods. When environments change, animals often move closer together into smaller areas that still have suitable conditions. This increased contact can spread disease more quickly among populations. When animals are already weakened by lack of food or harsh conditions, disease can spread more easily and cause higher death rates. Disease can affect both land and marine organisms, and when it spreads widely, it adds to the stress already present in ecosystems. Habitat loss is another major factor in mass extinctions. Habitat refers to the natural home of a species, where it finds food, shelter, and space to reproduce. When climate change, sea level change, volcanic activity, or asteroid impacts alter the land or sea, habitats can shrink or disappear. Without suitable habitats, species cannot continue normal life processes. Some species attempt to move to new areas, but not all are able to survive in new environments. When habitat loss happens across large regions, many species disappear at the same time. Food chain disruption is closely linked to all these causes. Food chains describe the way energy moves from plants to herbivores and then to carnivores. When one part of this chain is damaged, other parts are affected. If plants decline due to lack of sunlight or poor soil, herbivores lose food. If herbivores decline, carnivores lose prey. During mass extinction events, many parts of food chains break down at the same time due to environmental stress and predator pressure. This leads to widespread loss of life across different groups of organisms. Marine ecosystems experience strong effects during mass extinctions. Many marine organisms depend on stable water temperature, oxygen levels, and chemical balance. When volcanic activity or climate change altered ocean conditions, many marine species were affected. Coral systems, shell-forming organisms, and small plankton populations are sensitive to changes in water chemistry. When these organisms decline, larger marine animals that depend on them also lose food sources. This leads to wide disruption in ocean life. Land ecosystems also experienced severe changes during mass extinction periods. Forests, grasslands, and other plant systems were affected by changes in temperature and rainfall. When plants declined, animals that depended on them either migrated or died. Herbivores were especially affected because they relied directly on plant availability. Carnivores were affected after herbivores declined. Over time, large areas of land experienced reductions in biodiversity. Another important factor in mass extinctions was the slow recovery of ecosystems after damage. When environmental changes happen quickly, living systems do not have enough time to adjust. Recovery of plant life can take long periods, and animal populations depend on plant recovery. If conditions continue to be unstable, ecosystems remain in a damaged state for long periods. During this time, predators continue to hunt remaining prey, which increases pressure on small populations that are already struggling. Atmospheric changes also influenced mass extinctions. The atmosphere controls temperature, sunlight penetration, and air quality. When large amounts of gases enter the atmosphere from volcanic eruptions or other events, they change how heat is stored and how sunlight reaches Earth's surface. Some gases trap heat, leading to warming, while others block sunlight, leading to cooling. Both types of changes place stress on living systems. Plants may reduce growth when sunlight decreases, and animals may struggle when temperatures shift beyond their tolerance range. Carbon dioxide levels also influenced environmental conditions during extinction periods. When carbon dioxide increases significantly, it affects temperature and ocean chemistry. Higher temperatures can change rainfall patterns and increase evaporation in some regions. In oceans, higher carbon dioxide can change water chemistry, making it harder for some organisms to build shells and maintain body functions. These changes affect many levels of marine life. Sulfur compounds released during volcanic activity can also affect the atmosphere. These compounds can form particles that reflect sunlight away from Earth. When less sunlight reaches the surface, temperatures drop and plant growth slows. This affects food availability for herbivores and carnivores. The reduction in plant life spreads through ecosystems, increasing stress on many species at once. During mass extinction events, small populations are especially vulnerable. When species numbers are already reduced by environmental stress, even small additional pressures can lead to further decline. Predators may continue hunting these small populations, disease can spread more easily, and habitat loss can prevent recovery. Over time, some species disappear completely from the environment.